So let me get started. So anyways, there's only 15 slides. We're going to go through it fairly quickly. No one needs to see my picture, but so California, there are technically 4 buckets that refrigerant regulations fall into. And here they are: SB 1103, SNAP 20 and 21. There's SB 1013, which we're going to talk mostly about today, and SB 1206, which is pending. It's been approved by the Senate. This is related to the ultra low class of refrigerants, or no GWP, which would, I guess, be water. On the ultra low side, it's anything under 10, the global warming potential of 10. There aren't too many alternatives in this space, primarily CO2. And the effective date for ultra low would be 2025, and the no GWP would be 2030. It might be a little extreme. We hope it'll go through a little bit of an update and an adjustment, but happy to talk about that a little today. Okay, so for new equipment, new HFC rules, AC equipment is $750 in 2026. I think our chillers, AC chillers, are 2026, and window AC units, non-residential and VRF are phased in between 2023 and 2025, or 2026, excuse me. And if you'll notice, in each of these cases, the expectation is that somewhere between 2024 and 2026, there'll be some significant changes to the allowable refrigerant that you can use when installing new equipment. This is a big summary sheet. When we provide you with the 9-page document, it's got a lot more detail. We did this because this slide could get really bogged down talking about individual refrigerants. And so we wanted to leave you the opportunity to see what the trigger numbers are. They're basically 4 triggers in California, which are similar in other states. 10, anything below 10 is considered ultra low. 150, which is another GWP trigger. 750 is another GWP trigger, you'll notice, and 1400. And you'll see there's actually 2 more, or 1 more, excuse me. But the reason we bring this up is this can get very confusing. And so you really want to familiarize yourself with what your limits are. We're not here to talk about any one particular refrigerant. For instance, R32 has a GWP of, I believe, 677 or 680, somewhere in that range. And, you've got R1234YF, the Z1. There'll be blends of all of these materials, but ultimately you'll be responsible for the installation of these units on your properties, and you'll have to be cognizant of what the GWP is for these materials when they're spec'd, and then whether or not you'll have access to both service, which sounds obvious, but that's a big hurdle. Is the service team equipped and prepared to handle that? And then additionally, what's the life cycle? When will these materials become obsolete? I talked to a grocer this week who halted all retrofits pending SB, 10 or 1206, because they're anxious that a requirement would be put in place in 2030 that they would not be able to support with their present retrofit plan. So we're trying to get these topics out there early enough that you can create a strategy for the future. 8 years seems like a long time off, but for those of us who've been doing this for 28 years, and there's many of us on this call who have, 8 years goes by very quickly, and all of a sudden you're responsible for an obsolete system that you can no longer support. So does anybody have any questions or statements that you want to make? All right. Well, since we're here talking about California, we want to talk about the refrigerants that are banned, that you can no longer be doing retrofits with. This is a list right here. This went into effect in 2019, essentially. So, any questions on the banned refrigerants? Making this too easy. All right. So, as part of the state of California's refrigerant reduction program, let's call it, because it's a fairly robust program. It would, the 4 R's under the refrigerant management program are really just at the 4th R now is adding reclaim. So it's record keeping, reporting, refrigerant retrofit report, record keeping, reporting, and reclamation is what the 4th R stands for. But if you have 20 or more facilities, you've already experienced this issue this year. We were all responsible for reporting the GHG, the global, the GHGP, greenhouse gas potential for sites in California. The state was kind enough to post the 2019 numbers, so they had already done the calculus on that. And then for 2020, we were all responsible for calculating the GHGP for the site, because this becomes a benchmark year. 2019 was the benchmark year for the for 2026, when the responsibility is to be 25% below the 2019 numbers. So that's why the 2019 numbers were so important. And this will only affect you if you have 20 or more facilities, or if you're a national grosser. And it applies to, of course, 50-pound or more systems. However, I will also point out that I do have several questions into the state of California related to 50-pound or more systems, because although the state is tracking 50-pound or more systems, you may find yourself in a situation in 2026 where you have reduced the size of your units to below 50 pounds. So they're no longer part of the calculus, but those reduced, or those smaller size 50-pound units also are now not counted as part of your inventory. So you may have some larger 404 or 507 systems left in place, and they may get counted. And so I'm not sure that, I'm positive that the state has not taken into consideration the fact that the system sizes will change and could remove them from the population of equipment that's counted. Now, does anyone have any questions about that statement? Because I find that's a very important nuance here. The state of California is counting the population of equipment and getting an average GHGP for 2019 that might exclude smaller machines, appliances in 2026 with lower GWP. And as a result of that, it could skew inventory numbers when reporting. It could make it look like you have a high GWP concentration because it's only related to those appliances over 50 pounds. Refrigeration appliances over 50. Anyone have any questions on that? Going once? Going twice? Okay. All right. So then you look to the right for 2030, and then the expectation is, again, you're 55% below the 2019 numbers. And it's very important to understand that until the state figures out what this if the calculus will allow for smaller machines, smaller appliances, I don't think we can really have a credible calculus determination of what the GHGP is for a site. And we can calculate it both ways in TrackRef, but if you're doing this manually, this becomes really complicated and a patchwork of math, and it leaves certain things off the radar that really should remain on the radar, even though they're smaller. This is my second biggest concern right here. Okay, the 4th R. I was going to put a survey in here, but I ran out of time, so my apologies. But The concept is that in any AC or VRF piece of equipment manufactured in 2023 and 2024, remember, this is the year where the 750 GWP limit goes into place, will have to have 10% of its initial charge come from reclaim. And Chase mentioned it at the beginning of the call. The EPA does not, the EPA has accepted, I shouldn't say that. The EPA has accepted AHRI 700 as the quality benchmark for the acceptable refrigerants in the United States. That's a requirement. If you're a reclaimer, you must reclaim to AHRI 700. There isn't a secondary standard. Why this becomes so important is that AHRI 700 is a specific quality requirement for virgin refrigerant. There is no allowance to sell reclaim as reclaim. You have to sell it as virgin refrigerant. Now, in doing some research this week, I did find one reclaimer who had created a new brand of refrigerant that was 100% reclaim sourced. They said, I don't know if that will help qualify for this 10 or 30% requirement in 2025 or 2026. But this is a very important gap in the state of California's R4 management responsibility. Okay, Gavin, am I missing any questions?
Nope.
Okay, great. All right. Please stop me. This is, again, the third thing I've mentioned that is I consider to be a major hurdle. If you're just taking it in and you want to send me an email later with questions, or you want us to submit a question anonymously to the state, we do it all the time. We also do it for the federal government. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I consider these vulnerabilities to be very important challenges to the operational success of the ARB, R4 program. All right. All right, if you're in food retail, many of you are. If you've already registered, there really are very few changes for you, if any. There are limits on what you can install, and you want to pay attention to your weighted average leak rate year over year. If you're a Green Chill member, you're already doing this. You want to go all the way to the 4th tab in Green Chill and look to see what your weighted average CO2 emissions look like. Not your leak rate based on your weight. So 10 pounds of R404 leaks in a 100-pound system and you have a 10% leak. Instead, you want to look at what is the weighted average of that CO2 number. That makes a big difference in the future. How they've calculated that is pretty straightforward. It just takes the greenhouse gas potential of all the refrigerants, which is the CO2 equivalent of each one, and instead of doing it by weight, gives it a weighted average for its impact based on its GWP. Again, silence, so I'll keep going. Okay, many of you may already know this, and so you're humoring me. We'll just keep plowing ahead here. Air conditioning. We have an upcoming 750 GWP limit in 2025, not 2023 as they had anticipated. There will be a one-time registration for these assets that can help your leak rate. And the other requirement is to track the end of life for all of these systems. What I will tell you is the state still has not responded to us on this registration opportunity for dilution, because the ideal year to do it would be 2026, not any year before that. But we are still waiting for responses from them. I'd hoped we would have answers for today's discussion. I sent some of these questions out months ago, particularly related to reclaim, and I've not heard anything back from them yet. So if you're wondering what are the GWP factors, I picked 5 of the more popular refrigerants. R32 may not be in the top 5 refrigerants, but it does have a low GWP and it is a fluorinated material. So these numbers here really indicate a fairly significant impact to climate. And that's why they're paying such close attention to this. And of course, R448 at 1386 does get you below that 1400 number, for future requirements. There's other refrigerants that do that as well. Last thing I want to mention, and we've gone through this pretty quickly, so again, ask any questions, is that this transition from R3 to R4, I think is a great idea. I think it ties this loose end together nicely for the state with their ability to manage reclaim. It's nice that the state wants to support reclaimers. I think that's fantastic, not only ambitious, but also needed. I was a reclaimer for 20 years. Some of the people on this call were also part of the reclaim industry during those 20 years. The challenge is that in order to make this operational, you have to be respectful of the limitations that exist. If the state wants to accept the concept of reclaim as a designated category of refrigerant, then they're going to have to ask AHRI for some support with that, because it doesn't exist right now. And I have not seen AHRI in any of the calls ever mention this topic to the state. Instead, they push back. They talk about, access to reclaim might not be broad enough, but they don't talk about the fact that there is no designation for reclaim. And I'm probably on my third iteration of questions to the state on this topic, and I still don't have an answer. So the nice thing is California does allow refrigerants to come from other states or anywhere outside of California in order for it to be included in the reclaim option. But that's really not our biggest problem. Our biggest problem in the state of California is that we don't have a definition for what reclaim means. Can it be 60-40, 60% reclaim, 40% virgin? You all might be surprised to find out that larger reclaimers tend to blend their virgin material with reclaim. They actually don't try to reclaim to a virgin standard. Instead, they dilute the reclaim material into a much larger population of virgin material. So they just take the two streams, mix them together. And what that does is it inhibits you from actually buying qualified, adequate reclaim material. I've had one very bad experience with this, with a grocer on the East Coast, go nameless. If anybody remembers, there was a time with R22 where you could increase the capacity of your system. So if you wanted to go from, 300-pound R22, refrigeration unit to a 400-pound, you had to increase capacity. Maybe you added, 4 or 8 extra doors and you needed that extra capacity. The EPA allowed you to use reclaim R22 in the expansion. So you were allowed to increase the size of the unit, but you had to use reclaim. We were not the supplier of the material. The supplier of the material was unaware that the material was being used to expand the capacity. And when the EPA, who was there to do kind of a photo moment, inquired, about the status of this material, it turned out that the material was virgin. It wasn't even reclaimed. But the grocer had actually sent the reclaim material to this reclaim operation. The reclaim operation received, let's say, 1,000 pounds and sent back 1,000. But the 1,000 pounds they sent back were not pure virgin. And as a result, this entire, what seemed to be an exciting moment, a great opportunity to talk about reclaim, turned out to be a nightmare for both the EPA and the grocer, who then had to retrofit this unit to a different refrigerant to accommodate the EPA's requirements. So it was really it was really a great example of how this reclaimed industry does not exist in the way that you might think it does, to be able to provide you with pure virgin material or pure reclaimed material, and not some blend of these two other, streams. Okay. Now we've got 5 minutes left. I really only have 2 slides. And so I'll just stop with this one right here. These are 2 great charts. We've been talking about California for a long time. Gavin's gone ahead and updated the California chart that we've been using with a bunch of new information. And actually, I'll do this because Gavin put it on there. But the proposed rulemaking to the AIM Act is on April 28th, which is next week. We missed last week. My apologies. I had something I could not get out of. And then 2 weeks away from that, so 3 weeks from today, we're going to be talking about fugitive emissions and tracking with software. So anybody who's doing any ESG record keeping or sustainability reporting, join us for that call. That is a very hot topic right now. We get more interest on this topic than any other topic, more than California, more than the AIM Act, ESG reporting and record keeping, and what's expected and what's needed. That's number one call every day. So are there any questions? Chase, any comments? Gavin, anything?
Nothing from the chat.
That's too easy. It's great.
No, I would say just look at the document that we're going to send over because it provides good guidance.
Yes, yeah, it does. We really condensed as much as we could onto 9 pages. It's really nicely spread out, 9 nicely spread out pages. And it should be pretty easy to read, although it's still 9 pages. I get it. All right, everybody. Again, thank you very much for joining us. I hope I made good use of your time. When I get answers to these questions, I promise I will send out the responses to all of you. All right.
Thanks, Ted.
You're welcome. Nice seeing some faces. Oh, I see one question. Did I see one question? Nope, that's it. All right, guys. Have a great week. I look forward to talking to everybody soon.
See you. Thanks.